Hello and welcome to Artisan City. Today I'm going to be building this cottage style bird feeder. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions for me about this build, and enjoy the video. To make the front and back walls, I set up and used the table saw to cut out two 8 and 5/16 inches by 5 and 11/16 inches rectangles out of a 3/8 inch particle board. I mark the middle of the boards along the 5 and 11/16 inch side and use a corner square to draw two 45-degree lines extending from the midpoint. I set up and used a chop saw to cut at a 45-degree angle, and I cut along the lines I just drew. Back to the table saw, I make the sidewalls by cutting out two 5 and 13/16 inches by 6 and 15/16 inches rectangles, again out of the 3/8 inch thick particle board. I change the angle of the table saw blade to 45 degrees and shave a sliver off the 6 and 15/16 inch side so that the angle of the sidewalls match the angle of the front and back walls. The next piece I make is the inside base piece that gets screwed in between the walls. I go back to the table saw and cut out a 4 and 15/16 inches by 6 and 15/16 inches rectangle out of a 3/4 inch thick piece of plywood. The front, back, and side walls, as well as the inside base, get coated in primer and are allowed to dry before assembly. To help build the house, I use corner clamps to secure the walls while I screw them together. Because I drill and screw into the edge of the particle board, bulging and splitting is a risk. To minimize this risk, I pre-drill a pilot hole for each screw with an 1/8 inch drill bit. For each hole, I use a 3/4 inch long screw and countersink a shallow hole with a 3/8 inch Forstner bit for the head of the screw to slide into. For extra strength, I add wood glue to each of the joints and to each screw. To make the siding for the house, I have a piece of 5/8 inch thick wood that I cut into 1-inch strips. The wood I'm cutting was from an old fence, and I chose it because its exposure to the elements gave it a lovely patina. I set up the table saw fence again and cut the widths of the strips in half. I want a log cabin look for the siding, so there are 4 different lengths that the sidings are cut to. The lines I mark indicate where I cut the sidings. I used a bandsaw to cut the siding down to the lengths that I marked. To primer the siding, I slightly water down the primer and lightly brush it on the siding. The goal is to lighten the wood, but not completely cover it, so the patina still shows through. Using the bandsaw, I mark and cut out 2 rectangles with the dimensions of 4.5 inches by 8 and 15/16 inches on a piece of 1/5 inch thick underlayment wood. To make the roof beam, I mark and cut a piece of 3/4 inch plywood to a length of 6 and 3/4 inches. I next set up a fence on the bandsaw so that it'll make a 3/4 inch cut. And I cut the plywood lengthwise along the 6 3/4 inch side. Both roof plates and the roof beam are covered thoroughly in pine. To make the roof tile, I set up a fence on the bandsaw to cut 1-inch strips out of a piece of 1/5 inch underlayment. The 1-inch strips get fed through the saw again, resulting in a 1-inch by 1-inch square. To cover the roof, I need to cut 108 tiles. 6 of the tiles will be cut in half, so that they measure 1/2 inch by 1 inch. I use a file to smooth out the edges of the tiles, and they are stained using a honey-colored finishing stain. I mark each of the roof plates into 6 equal parts that each measure 3/4 of an inch. I fill the bottom 3/4 inch box with wood glue and line the tiles up with that line that I marked. 1/4 of the tile should hang off of the roof plate. I start with a half tile on the bottom row. For each row up, I put a line of glue on the marked lines and on the top corner of the tiles in the previous row. I staggered the rows by alternating between the half and whole tiles. I kept layering the tiles, letting each row dry before moving on, until there is just one row left. I marked the midpoint of the roof beam as well as the back sides of the roof plates. I line up the midpoints, add glue, and screw the roof plates to the beam. Then I proceed with gluing down the last row of tiles, and once it is dried, I glue the long tile onto the top and the roof is finished. To make the opening for the bird food to slide through, I draw a horizontal line 1 inch from the bottom of the front wall. On that line, I put a vertical line 1 inch from the edges of the front wall. Where the lines intersect is where I will drill. I take a 1/2 inch drill bit and drill the 2 holes. I use a ruler to draw lines that connect the 2 holes together, and I use a jigsaw to cut out the area between the holes, using the lines as reference. I file down any uneven spots and touch up the primer. This gets repeated on the opposite side. I take the first 2 rows of sidings that go on the bottom of the front and back of the house and clamp them into position. I take a pencil and trace the outline of the seed hole onto the back of the sidings. I use the outline I traced as a stencil for where to drill the 2 holes. I draw lines connecting the holes and use a scroll saw to cut along the lines. This gets repeated on the other side. To put the sidings on the house, I start with the ones I cut to match the seed holes. All I do is add the wood glue, stick it onto the house, clamp it, and allow it to dry before moving up to the next row. When I get to the top, I custom cut more siding pieces to match the roof line using the bandsaw. Once all of the siding is on, I primer any remaining siding and set it aside to dry. To make the catch trays, I take a 3/4 inch piece of pine and I cut out 2 4 3/4 by 1 1/2 inch rectangles on the bandsaw. I freehand cutting out the middle part, but I tried to keep the remaining walls about 3/8 of an inch thick. I make the inside slope by cutting 2 rectangles out of 1/5 inch wooden underlayment on on the bandsaw. The first rectangle measures 4 7/8 inches by 5 inches, and the second rectangle measures 4 7/8 inches by 5 1/4 inches. Both rectangles get a coat of primer. To make the base, I draw cut lines on a 1/2 inch thick piece of plywood. The dimensions of the base are 8 inches by 12 inches. I use a bandsaw to cut out the base. I give the base a coat of primer, and then I spray paint it with a coat of dark gray paint. To install the slope, I place a piece of 3/4 inch scrap inside on both ends of the house. The scrap will help keep the slope in the middle. I glue the ends of both of the slope pieces and lean them against each other, making sure that the taller piece is on top. And here's the final product.